Hi, everybody, and welcome to R&D Unplugged number 4. It's a pleasure and an honor to have with us today Laelia Benoit. I'll let her introduce herself and take it away. Laelia, welcome.
Thank you, Shahar. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Laelia. I'm a child adolescent psychiatrist. I was born here in Paris, did my medical here at Adolescent, and I'm now working at Yale University. I'm very happy to be here today because I know the Learning Science Institute for a while now, and it's always a pleasure to come and see everyone and their absence. So the topic we're going to talk about today is: do we really love children? Sometimes we think we do, but that's questionable. So maybe we'll try think together about ways in which in our daily lives we see that sometimes we don't really love children that much, and how we can change our perspective and how we can get inspired from research to address this problem. So I had just one slide, and I had done my best with my skills with PowerPoint to try to show things once at a time. It didn't work, so that's, I did my best, but let's use the slides, so we'll see what we're going to talk about today. So I wrote this book in French, which is called Infantisme. It's offer or translation for Childism in English. Childism stands for prejudices and discriminations against children. We didn't have a word in French to say that. So that's why I wrote this tiny book to try to explain it. That's not because we didn't have a word that we didn't have the issue, but that sometimes we miss the word to talk about the issue. So let's talk a little bit about childism, and then maybe we'll think about some examples. If you have examples in your daily life that you would like to share, I think it's very interesting. So a person who wrote about this is Elizabeth Longbro. She was from the Child Study Center at Yale, where I'm working. And she explained something very interesting, is that even if we think we love children, actually kids are discriminated every day. They are humiliated, they are often seen as inferior, unfinished little beings, and that we need to change our perspective on that. Something she says is that it's a continuum. It's not on one side mistreated children, those who are beaten, who have parents who hate them, who are miserable, who need child protection services. And on the other hand, all those loved, desired, spoiled kids. What Elizabeth Longbro said is that actually almost every single child, even if they live in a perfect family, even if they just go out of their family and just walk in the street, will experience some sort of humiliation just for being children. So we could make a parallel here with feminism, for instance. The same view would be to say in feminism, like either your husband is beating you, or you are perfect woman, and you are not experiencing any sexism, any discrimination. Well, no, even if things are much, much better, there is still room for improvement, and even little details sometimes hurt. So maybe we can take a moment right now just to think about what are the small little things we say to children or we ignore about them that may feel hurtful. You have an idea?
Yeah, we tend to tell them what they feel isn't true, like, oh, don't worry, it's fine, when they're sad or when they're upset, and we invalidate their emotions.
Their emotions, exactly. Oh, that's nothing. Yeah, you're fine.
Why are you crying? It's awesome.
Exactly, that's a great one.
Sometimes when they ask questions and you respond, when you grow up, you will understand. So it means like for now, you don't have access to something which is important or you're curious about.
Exactly. And what is the purpose of this answer? Who is this answer made for?
Just to delay this question in time.
Yeah, it's an answer for the adults. It's like, you know, it's hard and complicated.
I'm not ready to answer now, to deal with this now.
Exactly. Yeah. It will take me a lot of time and trouble to find the right way to answer to you. So I'll just say like, you know, you cannot know. That's because I'm in trouble to answer you. That's a good one. Any other idea?
Keeping them out of the way by sending them to school for the full day, doing things that they don't really choose all the same.
Exactly. You need to stay in school from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and please don't be in the streets. Like, you are noisy, you know, you move too much. That's a good one. Exactly. All those are really good ones. Sometimes we also hear, oh, when I was young, you know, we used to be well-behaved, we used to work hard, and nowadays, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's a very common one. Sometimes, and it's harder to spot, compliments are actually timeless. It's like, oh, it's such a good boy, you know, he slept all night. You know, for a baby, for instance, he slept all night. That's such a good boy. Well, if he hadn't slept all night because he's teething or he's just too young, does it mean he's bad or naughty? No. Yeah. So all those things are signs of childism. Any other?
Suggestion for developing their Bibles.
Exactly. You should remain silent. Yeah, so that's also a matter of who is taking space, who is using the room, who is making noise, actually. We were recording a podcast with my baby, right, you know, at the moment, and there was like some issue about who is making noise right now. I was speaking and he was babbling, and most probably he was thinking he was also able to say something. You know, we would think it's noise. He doesn't. So one of the things that is particularly interesting about childism is that if we are very childish, we'll have a hard time tackling issues that are mainly a problem for children. So that's why climate change is at the forefront of issues that will be a problem for children and young people. Even if we don't care about it, they will care about it because they will see the consequences. So one of the things I worked on was to see how newspapers, how journalists, media describe people when they take environmental action. What do they think about it? And actually, we searched all those newspapers from mainly American newspapers, but French were the same. And we were wondering, like, how do they depict those young activists? And there were a lot of childish caricature. They are skipping school instead of, you know, staying at school. They are being loud outside. They are missing school. They are loud protesters, and they were also very, I would say, positive, but still childish views. Like, oh, the young generation is wonderful. They are going to save the day. You know, almost thanks God they are here to take care of climate change because we didn't do anything, but now they are so brilliant and young. They are going to do it. What am I doing?
Giving the problem away.
Exactly. Unloading the responsibility of my shoulder and putting it on their shoulders. So all of this is childish. Same thing, we talk a lot about children, but what do we ask children what they think? So that's something we did in the study I conducted from Yale, where we asked young people from 7 to 18 what they thought about climate change and if they wanted to take action. So there are some papers published, you can read them if you want, but we'll focus now today on childism. So if you look at who is worried about the climate, you have 4 main groups of people who are more worried than others. Do you know whose groups they are? Which group they are? Or which groups of people are more worried than other groups in the general population
groups between 18 and 25, I think that there have been studies that show that this particular échantillon.
Yes, so young adults, 18 to 30, 25, 30. What about below 18? Are they worried or not?
Maybe, but I don't know. I don't have the numbers, but
Maybe, but it's not you don't have the numbers, it's we didn't ask them. You know, it's like they're too young to answer surveys, so we don't care, you know? But actually, you could extend this group to say like, you know, 5, 6. I mean, when you start thinking like, oh, animals are dying and stuff like this to 25, 30 years. So young people. That's all right. What are the 3 other ones?
Scientists? No?
Scientists? Yes, but they're such a tiny group, you know. Who are we, you know? So they're not really assessed just like this.
Activists? No?
Same thing. I was more thinking about social demographics, yeah.
say parents who have a
Same thing, such a tiny group. Think about bigger social demographic groups. Women? Why?
because it will probably be a mother one day and like to think about their children.
Yeah, that's an option. We'll think about why later, but that's, I mean, I don't want to distract you because it's interesting with the 2 last ones. What are the 2 last ones?
The elderly people?
No. Climate change is going to happen when I won't be here anymore. No, so not my problem.
The one size.
Even what I'm saying here is very general. Actually, there are a lot of, groups of grandparents fighting for climate and stuff like this. But in general, if you do these huge polls, you won't see a lot of older at all.
I mean, the global south is going to be much more effective.
Yes. So, but we don't ask them. It's just like it, But any other idea about 2 other groups?
Maybe with a high level of diploma, like no.
No, actually, quite the opposite is people with lower income are more worried. And what is the last one? So that's something we never asked about in France, but in other countries we ask about it because it matters. Yeah, ethnicity, race. So ethnic minorities are more worried. So what do you have if you have kids, women, ethnic minorities, low income people?
The people will be more impacted by climate change.
Yes, you have vulnerable minorities. And that's all the thing about intersectionality. You can also be like all the 4 at once, and that, that makes things worse, or 2 of them. So those are, what is common with those groups is that they know that first, their voice usually counts less than others' voice. They're not as often in position of power where things are being decided. And the other thing they know is that whenever there is trouble, they are the first one to pay the price. And that's history told, and they know about it. That whenever there is geopolitical trouble, whenever there is economic instability, all those things, whose rights are going to be targeted first? People from vulnerable minorities. So if we start thinking like this, it's just like, maybe it's not just a small issue.
Just for the people with lower income, is there kind of what do you mean exactly? What is low income? And is there a moment from which if the income is really too low, or it's like deep poverty, they do not have headspace to care about these things?
Yeah. So because what you are also targeting, I think, with this question is like, this is not what common sense tells us. Usually we think like environmental concerns are for rich white people who don't have other problems they should deal with first. That's what we used to think. And actually, those surveys, they were done in the US. So it's a relative low income people. Of course, if you were in the global south, or maybe there would be other more, urgent issues. But relative to the breadth of the population, those people have lower income. So those data I'm giving you are from the Yale Climate Change Communication Program, where they survey every year a representative sample of the US population. Okay, so are children a minority? We could think so. So here I'm just sharing with you a theory that if we think children are a minority, just like those three groups, then climate inaction, not doing anything about climate change, is a way to tell them we don't care about you. You know, we are not taking seriously the main challenges you are going to have to face. So, so that's one of the things we can understand. Why are we saying that? Because what happens if your rights or your future is being threatened all the time and if your needs are being overlooked as a group? Not just as an individual, but you belong to a group in society and your needs are constantly being overlooked. What happens?
You want to like stand up, maybe like fight for something.
Yes,
Resist.
exactly. Yes, and that's, you know, the movement for climate of young people, like trying to have a voice, going to strikes, protest, you know, Greta Thunberg movements, all of this. You want to stand up and fight for your rights. That's very good. What is the other option if this doesn't work or no one's listening to you? Depression. You get depressed. Exactly. And that's in the first place why I started working on climate change anxiety with children, because kids are being worried. And what do people ask me when kids are worried? They say like, oh, Laelia, you're a psychiatrist, you know, could you take care of those kids? You know, they're a little bit depressed. Could you do some therapy, talk with them, give them some medication or something, you know, because we don't know what to do with that. Well, that's not always a good idea, especially if it's not one kid being depressed, but it's the sign of children and young people in general being despised by our society. So that's where we need to know a little bit about the history of research, because there are research fields that have investigated that. If you look at research on sexism, on racism, on homophobia, on anti-Semitism, what do you find? Among those groups who can be targeted, some individuals will develop depression. Does it mean we need to treat those individuals and focus on, you know, finding the new medication? Or does it mean we should stand up together to change the system, to stop hurting those people? Probably answer number two. I'm very biased here, acknowledging. But that's a way also to conduct research, because you are all going to be doing research. And research is not always just about the tiny individual, what should I do? It's also sometimes thinking, you know, outside of the box, thinking about the system. And there are fields that have done that before your work, before my work. And we can get inspired and use the same methods and use it. So why people in power couldn't care less?
Well, children can't vote, so
Yeah, people in power are usually not children. That's, yeah, so they're not very relevant.
they can't even vote for them, so they don't, because it doesn't count as a vote, so.
Exactly, exactly. That's a very good point. When you are a policymaker and you need to be elected, you're going to do things that are useful for people who are going to vote for you. Mm-hmm.
In a short-term perspective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In a very short term perspective, but you know, you're here for 3, 4, 5 years, you know, so who cares? That's a very good one. Any other idea?
Children don't have any. What they say?
Exactly. So they have, yeah, they have little power, so they're not going to be big consumers directly, at least. Indirectly, through their parents, yes, but not yet.
There is maybe also this idea that this is not so. I know this is in the family where you deal with education and those really specific issues. And maybe like with liberalism, like the state doesn't have to really impose one idea on this matter?
Yeah, if I hear well, you're saying like that children stuff are circumscribed to very specific area, like schools, family. Who is working in those areas? Women? Has there been women? Okay. So like very, specific, and please stay here, you are just like we say, just like, mommy, you are the best in the kitchen. Or the queen. So stay where you are. So let's, let kid stuff be dealt by people who deal with that. So that's a very good point. And also, why do people seek power? People who are in power, why do they seek power? Most of the time, not all of them. Sometimes people have a really good vision and they have a really good reason to be here. They have a purpose and they really want to make a change. And that's fantastic. But that's not always the case. Sometimes for ego, to compensate for wounds. Feeling of failures, not being seen, not being heard. And actually, they're very interested, also quite depressing, psychological studies on leaders of this world and their childhood. And especially the ones who are really, really bad leaders, they had like really, really bad childhoods. Being despised, not listened to, having expectations that they could never meet, always being insufficient, never receiving unconditional love. So what you do when you're an adult, you are seeking this approval all the time. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more, and it's never enough. So are you sure you want to, connect with children who are like not giving you any vote, who are not in power, will not make you feel brilliant? Not really. Maybe, and that's something that Isabel Youngborough says, maybe you even want to try to distance yourself from that. Because what do you remember from your own childhood? Shame, humiliation. So you want to say like, no, now I'm an adult. I'm not anymore in like this despicable state. I'm not anymore a kid, I'm an adult. So that's what happened with a lot of people in power and a lot of adults in general. They just want to, distance themselves from children because they have bad memories. Any comments about this? Question?
It's getting highly depressing.
Getting better all the time.
Yeah. But that's how we have to reconnect, with our roots. Because otherwise, what are we doing if we are adults and we don't care about children anymore? Being that is only a choice. You can choose to still be in touch with your own child, with your inner child, and to still remember how you were feeling when you were young and what was, what could be hurtful or what you felt was a good reason to fight for. And you can be a good advocate for this if you are still connected with your inner child. You don't need to forget about them. Okay, so now towards some, some options to try to change things and not just depressing contents. So something I are talking about in this book is the importance of supporting the emotional development of children. But that goes with our own emotional development. We are not able to support the emotional development of anyone if we are not taking care of ourselves. It doesn't mean we need to be an expert. Like, oh my God, I don't know how to do, so I'll never know how to do it. It just means we have to start with self-care, with being compassionate, with how we feel things, and creating room to welcome whatever comes with kids. That will give them what? A lot of things. First, they will feel this unconditional love. Like, I can be how I am. I can have my feelings, just like you said, my feelings are going to be validated. So I'm just enough. And what a beautiful feeling, no? To think like, oh, I'm enough. I don't need to be like smiling all the time. I don't need to be happy all the time. I'm just enough. I don't need to save the world. I'm just enough. So that's perfect. Most probably, if you do that with children around you, they are not going to be tyrants of the world. Maybe not even presidents of nothing. Is that really a problem? I don't know. I would say no. Or maybe there will be one that's with a lot of vision and very inspiring. So first, giving this feeling that I'm enough. And what is the second thing? And here I'm creating a link with climate change. What is the second thing you learn when your emotions are welcome? And you can feel what you feel, and that's okay. What else you learn?
Satisfied with what you have. Satisfied with what you have.
To be satisfied with what you have. Exactly. You learn you don't have to distract yourself from your feeling, you don't have to repress yourself from your feelings, and you don't have to be always wanting more. Because what is one of the problems we have with climate change and the environment in general? The problem we have is that we are over-consuming. It's not that we are consuming. We all need to wear clothes, we all need to breathe. When I'm breathing, I'm creating some carbon, we need to live. And that's totally fine. There is enough in our planet for us to breathe, have a home, have clothes, and everything. But there is not enough in our planet for us to overconsume. And why do we overconsume? If we look into it, most of the time, because we're not feeling at peace. Because our emotions are not good. Because we are feeling depressed, because we have low self-esteem, because we are comparing to, what the neighbors have, because we are trying to keeping up with the Jones, as they say in America. It's like, oh, you bought a new car, I need a new one now. So, oh, you did this wonderful wedding with 300 people. I need to do that. So, I need to go on vacation on this island for just today. No, you don't need that. We don't need that. If we feel okay with our feelings, if we feel that sometimes we could compare ourselves with others, but that's okay. We're just enough. So being okay with our feelings helps us take care of the planet. But in order to do that, we need from the get-go, we need from the start to be welcome as we are and to be validated in our feelings. So we just cannot do that if everyone has childish behaviors around us all the time when we are kids. Otherwise, we grow up feeling inadequate, and we try to compensate for that. And we are just this perfect consumer trying to, make believe that we are a good person, a right person, a good enough person. What time do we have left?
You still have
Okay.
But let's have first of them.
Yeah, maybe a last topic, and we can just open for question. One of the topics I open to discussion in this book, I don't have any definite answer to it, but it's just a question open, is what if children were able to vote? We had, who was saying that, you were saying that the reason why people in power don't care is that children are not voting for them. So what if children were able to vote? What would happen?
The world would be a massive playground.
Exactly. If my baby was able to vote, he would vote against sleeves because he hates wearing sleeves. So everyone would wear a Marseille, just like I'm wearing no sleeves anymore. So that would be probably one of his first measures. But most probably after that, maybe he would ask for having more people at daycare because he likes being held. And if there are only like 2 adults for 8 kids, it doesn't work. Maybe he would ask for more parental leave, to have his parents clothed, things like this. it starts looking like policies, actually, or budgets, or choices for investment. Where do you put your money? So maybe we would have things like this. And maybe, yes, the outside would look like a playground.
But what you are saying will require from the baby a lot of criticism of the situation. And I don't think when you were young, depending on the age, but you are so influenced by your parents. I don't know how the criticism step back to analyze the situation and take your own decision.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the main criticisms against this idea, is that you're going to vote just like your parents, you know? So first things first, usually you just vote like your parents. Even when you reach 18, a lot of, I mean, yeah, if maybe not individually, but if you look at, you know, average, people usually just vote like their family. So, you know, but that's one of the things that people are really afraid about. Yeah.
I think it will implement also changes on programs, because we will have to prepare citizens not from 18 to the rest of their life, but from 9 or 7. So it will totally change the global perspectives of education. And also it will, you know, like the ways the children will consider themselves will also change totally, because they will know that they have the right to speak out. So it will have like some macro institutional impacts, but also in the way we consider ourselves as human beings. It will really impacting.
Yes, and it will change the balance of power, even on a micro level. That's right. And you are right, everyone will be freaking out like, oh my God, they're going to vote and don't know about what they are voting for. So maybe we should teach them what's happening in the world. And that could be probably one of the tasks of the school, but maybe that would be interesting. So there is something in France, at least that is called Education Civique, where you have 1 hour once in a while, where they, you know, share with you like the parliament chamber and stuff like that are like, that have no sense and that are anyway not impactful in any ways. You don't have any, not after you don't even have any tests, you know, and you don't have any, it's just, you know, 1 hour wasted. Maybe this time would be much more important, or maybe we'd have more time if there was something at stake.
Thank you. Just one comment about the voting rights. So I wanted just to think about this from other perspective, the voting responsibility too, because like, as I remember when I was a kid, it was like such a great time when I could just do what I like, not just to think about some issues, some responsibility, and it, because I could have the support from my family. But in case if we do this voting, we give this voting right to children. So it means like we also give them some part of responsibility. And in case they take it serious, maybe it will take out a little bit of their childhood also.
Yes, the childhood is a moment where you can feel like lives.
Yeah, do some mistakes, not overthink about the consequences.
I am and all those things. You are totally right, and that's a very reasonable, you know, argument against it. Also, if you look in history, that was something similar was said about women's right to vote. I don't want to go with, you know, and like, I'm not sure they're super interested in what's happening in the world. All of this is so stressful. So, just as an inspiration, we could see like, maybe, you know, if you're, but of course you need education, you need support, and you need to know that even if you regret the person or like, you know, the thing for which you voted when you were 8 years old, that's fine. It's not like the same importance as when you grow older. And if you ask some adults, they would say like, oh, I regret the people I voted for 2 years ago, you know. Some people will say like, oh my God. So even as an adult, you do mistakes sometimes, or you don't have complete information, or things you thought were going to happen didn't happen, and that's, you know, learning is trial and error.
I think that part of the question, part of the answer to your question we actually have, right? Because those that were kids, what it was, 18 minus 1 day and couldn't vote, voted the day after. Or those that you interviewed that did your work probably 2-3 years ago, right, are now voting. Right? And there are countries in Europe in which they started voting in 16, which means, look, so we can look at this data, right? And what does this data tell us? First of all, most of them don't vote, right? So giving rights to people to vote does not mean that they exercise it. So there is something, rotten or bad in the way that we, in general, treat the democratic process and what it is, independent of age. But it turns out that actually youngsters tend to vote less than adults, right? And the second thing that we could see is that while in the last elections, right, I call it eco-anxiety, or at least the fact that you are aware to the danger in front of you, brought a sort of a green wave, right? That was largely supported by youngsters, right? And we see that it's the same population today, right? That voted, right? That go to the extremes today, right? And the newcomers that come, they don't even pass by the green and then go to the extreme, right? They go directly to the extreme, right? So that the way that, so it's very nice to say, we should get the votes, right? But there is something awfully wrong going out there, right? Of saying that, the kind of influences that we have, right? That I would say that are undemocratic, but on how people think about the world and what are the important issues, right, around, right? Touch youngsters or influence youngsters, right, in a much more severe way than it touches adults, right? TikToks, whatever false information, etc., right? So the core of the issue for me, right, is not whether to vote or not, because even when you give rights to vote, people don't exercise it, right? But a real reconfiguration of our society and how we pass information, how we form citizens, what it means to be citizen, and this has to start at that age, right? So it's not a matter of starting to vote at 18 or 16 or 14, right? It's a matter of what process you do in order to make people aware in the environment and take this responsibility. And I think that just waving, let's let them vote, right? I mean, there are people that I think shouldn't vote for other reasons. It's like, and age is not a concern. It's not a concern.
Exactly. So age is not always a concern. Those are like sometimes other criteria that come into play, and all the data yours are correct. So yeah, some people tend to vote more for extremes or tend not to vote. What happens if it's the first time you are exercising a right that you are not really prepared to? Sometimes it's just like the first time, no one told you about it, you are not being raised or taught or in a way that you feel like this is your job, and that's something there is a place where you belong, and that's this place. So that's maybe one of the reasons. The other confounding criteria is that we know that for the extremes, the lower the level of education, the highest the chances of voting for extremes. And that's a confounding factor, because if you are young, sometimes you don't have such a high level of education. And we have seen people change their votes over the years from 20 to 30, when they reach a higher level of education, they get some diploma they didn't have before. And even if they first voted for extreme, like the extreme right, sometimes they just change their minds whenever they reach a higher level of education. Some data also show that. So we have a lot of, confounding factors. And then, yes, of course, like, are you being influenced by media? Do you only get your news on TikTok? Is this the only information you get? So this opens a huge amount of questions about actually how are we raising, educating, teaching young people? Are we, this question of voting really gets us to, we should raise to the circumstances, we should do our best so they are really prepared to have this right. We cannot just say like, oh yeah, you just go and everything will be good. No, maybe we have to change something. I also talked with young people about that. And some of them were just like, oh, no, please, I don't want to vote because you have to choose just one person and they say something, you don't know if they're doing it. You agree with part of what they say, but then you don't agree with other things. But you still have to choose one person. So I don't want to vote. What does it tell you? If you just listen to that and you're just like, oh, they don't want to vote. Otherwise, you can just tell them, like many adults feel just the same. Many adults are just so uncomfortable having to vote for one person that they don't know much about and saying that afterwards this person will have all power to do whatever they want for many years. And there are countries where there are other systems to vote. For instance, if you take Switzerland, which is a tiny country, they're really, they have a lot of money, so a lot of things are easier in Switzerland. That's a bit famous. But they are doing legal votes, legal elections for particular statements, particular choices. Do you want the train to be open 2 more hours every day? If that's the case, we are going to increase the taxes by that. Or if we do that, then we won't have the budget to create this playground for children, in the neighborhood. What do you choose? Those are legal stakes with consequences, and actually it works fine. And if we felt we could change the system, many adults would say like, I would rather vote for those things, instead of voting for one person.
On this line of conversation, have you been studying the levels of youth participation in some systems in northern countries where the young people that don't get the civic education per se, that they participate in the life of a school, of a canteen, of a sports, co-creating the rules, sometimes the spaces, so they are citizens of the school. If you take the youth parliaments across 5,000 villages in India, where the children in these villages, so it's not only in the Netherlands or in Denmark, in India, where they play the role of Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and they make kind of decision and influence. So this level of youth participation from a very young age in preparation of being able to be voters. I don't know if you have studies or looked at this, and the scale of participation with Roger Hart and many others, and it's much more there than the civic education alone. 1 hour or 2 hours or 5 hours of civic education won't change anything. Participation, so I don't know.
Totally agree with you, Olivier. And there are still studies to do. If you want to join to do some research, if you want to do something on that, there is a lot of studies to do. It's the, self-education, and that's what you do here. It's doing all this research to try to see, does it have an impact? Those research are hard to do because you are studying an entire generation. You're starting to implement something, and then 30 years later, you see the results. Even for many research, it's hard. But if you are just tracking, let's say, the blood pressure, just do a few things and you track the blood pressure. But now you're tracking an entire society. Is it working well? Is it functioning? Are people happy? Are people voting? How is the democracy healthy? How do you measure that? Imagine, if you were to write the study protocols, that's so hard to do. So that's why we have data, but there are not that many. Those are not my data. I'm just talking in this field, but it's very interesting, and that thing we could track. And that's also where I agree with what Ariel was saying. If we just give the rights to children and we don't change anything about their childhood and their lives, are they going to be able to use it? So what you're saying, Olivier, is really like if you learn to be a citizen by being a citizen from a very young age, then you're ready. You are doing it on a daily basis. You're co-constructing, you're collaborating with others, you have a voice, and then, of course, you're a member of a healthier democracy.
On the exact opposite side, and I stop there, we see that on companies targeting the young people to sell them all what they don't need. I mean, there's a program called Children No Policies that was done by UNICEF and WHO and the Lancet, which was published in 2020, February, I think, but really showing that big companies are saying this in a very, 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 determined way.
Yeah.
What are the ways of fighting this? Because this would be also something we need. Like it's consumption.
There are a lot of powerful forces trying to make that consumer things we don't need. And just to going back to what we were saying at the beginning, what is the link between democracy and Childism in general? If you look at, for instance, the Swedish system, and if you compare this with the French system, here I'm citing the work of Marion Puert, who has written this book, Une enfance en or, N-O-R-D, which is a play between Gold and Norse, which works in French but not in English. What she says is that French tend to see children as little beings that should be tamed, like they should be quiet, they shouldn't speak, they should respect authority, and they should agree with a vertical relationship with adults, telling them what they should do, and that's it. And if they start doing something, French see that as chaos, like this is dangerous. On the other side, Swedish people or the Swedish culture would say that a child who obeys too quickly or too much is a danger because he's going to be a citizen, and a citizen who has been taught to obey, and not to think, and to be submissive to just one person is someone who is going to follow a leader that will be an authoritarian leader. And if we raise young citizens like this, then what will happen to democracy? If they don't know how to collaborate, how to co-construct, how to listen to different perspectives, how to take ownership of their own actions, then they'll probably want to follow blindly one person who is going to say everything. And that's not good for democracy. So the Swedish, at least, they really make the link between Childism and what kind of society do you want? All right, I think the next one question. Do we still have time?
We should come to an end.
Maybe one last question?
It was more like an observation than a question, but I was thinking about the way of maybe integrating more young people in the actual kind of democracy we have in France. And I was thinking about the famous now Ministry of Future. That could be the embodied parts of children into the government. Do you know if there's some kind of institution like that in the world already? Or?
Yes, there are several institutions where children have committees around the world. The UNICEF, the United Nations, a lot of collectively try to do that. Actually, if you ask young people what they think about it, at least some of them who participated in those things have actually been disappointed. Even if the idea is fantastic, sometimes they feel that what they are doing is not making a change. So I'm not saying that I'm sure there are people who are very happy and for which it's work, but the ones I interviewed were about climate action, and some of them would have said oh, I went to the COP, and that's where I realized that a lot of environmental stuff is just marketing, it's greenwashing, that I was just here as a token because we would have to show the young person being here to say yes, take your people into account. And they were very frustrated and very disappointed. Others, even if they didn't go to the COP, had taken roles of eco-delegate. I don't know if you know about eco-delegates. In high school or even middle school, you can be the person representative for your class to help, have a greener school or a greener school lifestyle. So you can take environmental action. What they would say is that, perfect, you're elected, and then you can't do anything. If you want to do one simple change, it takes 6 months to meet with the school director, and then they say, oh, it's much harder than what you think. That's very French, you don't imagine, we'll have to think about it. There is a process. And then, 12 months later, nothing happens. And that's very disappointing. So as a takeaway, I would say like roles, titles are okay, but what really matters is doing something. Even if you start with a small thing, if you feel you were able to do it from beginning to the end, even if it starts with a small project, that's the thing that makes you feel the more empowered. So if you want to help a young person do something, just help them go, until the end of their project and manage to do something. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I think it's time to stop. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.